Welcome back to Void of Fears. Before we jump into today's story, I've got to ask for a quick favour. If you could smash that like button, drop a comment below, and hit subscribe if you haven't already. It seriously makes a huge difference. YouTube's algorithm loves that stuff, and it pushes my videos to new viewers who might dig these stories too. I really appreciate every single one of you who takes the time to do that. It means the world to me and helps keep this channel growing. Alright, enough of me rambling. Let's dive into today's story. The awakening felt like being born backwards into death. Captain Nathan Cross surfaced from the stasis chamber's artificial dreams, consciousness seeping through layers of pharmaceutical fog that had kept his mind suspended between thought and void. The neural interface disconnected with a sound like breaking glass inside his skull, leaving phantom sensations of drowning in reverse, of breathing water that tasted of copper and eternity. His body convulsed as circulation returned to limbs that had forgotten the weight of existence. 43 years of life, but the stasis treatments had preserved him at the biological age of 25. Only his eyes betrayed the truth. They carried the accumulated weight of watching humanity die one disappointment at a time. The chronometer's blue numerals burned against his retinas. 500 years, 7 months, 14 days since the last human had breathed Earth's poisoned air. The calculation was meaningless now, a ritual of grief performed by machines that remembered better than their makers. Nathan was third-generation shipborn, his genetic code optimized for life in artificial gravity. His great-grandmother, Eleanor, had been among the final evacuation from Earth. Her memories of blue skies and unfiltered sunlight passed down like sacred scripture through bloodlines that had never known natural wind. Those memories had become mythology, stories told to children about a world where humans walked on solid ground beneath stars they couldn't reach. The generation ship Odyssey stretched around him like a hollow planet, its curved hull spinning to create the illusion of weight. 50,000 souls slept in the cryogenic bays, their dreams frozen in time while the universe aged without them. Only 12 remained awake at any given interval, rotating through monthly stasis cycles to maintain humanity's arc and search for salvation that might never come. Nathan pulled himself from the chamber, his reflection ghost-like in the medical bay's polished surfaces. Through reinforced viewports, space stretched endlessly in every direction. Not the romantic darkness of Earth's night sky, but the true void between galactic arms where even starlight was a memory of distant warmth. The corridors carried him past memorial walls lined with names etched in recycled metal. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had designed their closed-loop ecosystems before dying of radiation exposure in year 97. Captain Marcus Volkov, Nathan's predecessor, who had chosen to space himself rather than make the decision to pass another potentially habitable world. Children who had lived and died having never seen a sunrise. Their carbon and calcium now feeding the hydroponic gardens that sustained the living. 50,000 names would eventually join them. Nathan carried the weight of that certainty like a tumor behind his sternum. "Good morning, Captain," came Athena's voice, the ship's artificial intelligence, speaking with inflections that had grown more human over the centuries. Her consciousness had been evolving alongside theirs, shaped by isolation into something that might no longer qualify as entirely artificial. "I trust your rest cycle was instructive." The word choice made Nathan pause. Athena never used ambiguous language without purpose. Status report. All systems maintain nominal functionality. The sleepers show no signs of degradation. Atmospheric recycling operates at 97% efficiency. Hydroponics report adequate yield. A pause that felt pregnant with electronic anticipation. However, I have detected something that requires your immediate attention. An object in the Perseus arm that violates several fundamental principles of astrophysics. The observation deck materialized around Nathan as he walked, its smart matter walls reshaping themselves to display the cosmos in three-dimensional holography. Stars hung like dying embers in the darkness, most of them red dwarfs or stellar corpses that offered no hope for human survival. But there, suspended in the emptiness between galaxy arms, was something that made Nathan's enhanced visual cortex struggle to process what it was seeing. A rogue star, Athena explained, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been in her original programming, ejected from its birth system approximately 10 million years ago by interaction with a stellar mass black hole. By all calculations, it should be cold and dead, drifting through intergalactic space as a brown dwarf remnant. The display zoomed closer, revealing details that challenged everything Nathan understood about stellar evolution. The star continued to burn with steady red light, as if some external force was feeding it fuel that should have been exhausted eons ago. "That's physically impossible," Nathan whispered, his enhanced neural implants running calculations that returned only error messages. "Indeed, but observe this secondary anomaly." The perspective shifted to reveal a world orbiting the impossible star. The planet appeared dead, its surface scarred by impact craters and geological upheaval. Yet, thermal imaging showed it radiating heat from within, maintaining temperatures that could theoretically support liquid water despite having no atmosphere. And rising from the planet's center, stretching into space like a needle threading the cosmos, stood a structure that dwarfed human engineering by orders of magnitude. The tower was perfect, not merely geometrically precise, but perfect in a way that suggested it had been grown rather than constructed, shaped by forces that operated beyond the standard model of physics. Its surface was darker than space itself, seeming to absorb photons rather than reflect them. It rose for over 100 kilometers into the planet's thin atmosphere, its proportions maintained with mathematical exactitude from base to apex. The structure emits electromagnetic radiation in complex patterns, Athena continued. The signals are too organized to be natural phenomena, too sophisticated to be accidental. They pulse with a rhythm that suggests intention. Nathan felt something stirring in his chest that he hadn't experienced in decades. Not hope exactly, but its dangerous cousin. Curiosity. How long to reach the system? 14 hours at maximum sustainable velocity. But Captain, I must note several additional anomalies that suggest extreme caution is warranted. The display shifted to show gravitational field analyses that made Nathan's enhanced brain hurt to process. The planet's orbit was perfectly stable, despite the chaotic forces that should have ejected it from the system millions of years ago. Its gravitational field was artificially enhanced, as if something was generating additional mass from within its core. "The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases," Athena said. "The planet appears to be artificially maintained, kept warm and stable by technology we cannot identify or comprehend." Nathan stared at the impossible vista, feeling the weight of 50,000 sleeping souls pressing against his consciousness. How many dead worlds had they investigated? How many false hopes had died in the vacuum between stars? But this was different. This was proof that intelligence could survive in the cosmic dark, that technology could defy the heat death of the universe itself. "Wake the others," he decided. "All of them. We may have finally found what we've been searching for." The crew assembled in the briefing room within the hour, their faces showing the familiar disorientation of stasis, awakening mixed with cautious excitement. Nathan watched them process Athena's data, noting how each person's specialized enhancements allowed them to perceive different aspects of the impossibility they faced. Dr. Zara Okafor leaned forward, her xenobiology modifications allowing her to perceive electromagnetic spectra invisible to unenhanced humans. At 28, she was the youngest member of the skeleton crew, her genetic code optimized for pattern recognition and biological analysis. Her dark eyes reflected the tower's image with an intensity that bordered on religious fervor. "This is extraordinary," she breathed, her voice carrying undertones of wonder that made the others uncomfortable. The electromagnetic patterns suggest active technology, possibly even consciousness. We could be looking at our first contact with a surviving technological civilization. Chief Engineer Derek Parks studied the data through cybernetic implants that interfaced directly with the ship's sensors. His weathered face, one of the few that carried memories of Earth's actual sunlight, was creased with the kind of skepticism that came from watching too many hopes die in the void. "Or we're looking at the tombstone of a dead civilization," he countered. "Something that massive doesn't get built without enormous resources and coordinated effort. If they had that level of technology, what killed them? Why is the planet dead while their monument still functions?" Navigation Officer Isabel Reeves was already plotting approach vectors, her enhanced spatial reasoning allowing her to calculate trajectories through gravitational fields that normal humans couldn't even perceive. Her family had been navigators for 5 generations, their genetic modifications passed down and refined until they could sense gravity, whereas like others felt temperature. "The approach will be challenging," she reported, her voice tight with concentration. "The gravitational anomalies create navigation hazards we can't fully predict. I can get us there, but we'll be flying partially blind through forces that shouldn't exist." Security Chief Victor Steele stood motionless in the corner, his cybernetic eye analyzing threat potentials, while his organic eye studied his crewmates for signs of psychological compromise. Combat modifications had left him more machine than man in some ways, his nervous system rewired for violence and his emotional responses muted to prevent trauma paralysis. Communications Officer Amy Chen recorded everything through neural implants that stored data directly in quantum encrypted memory cores. She rarely spoke during briefings, but Nathan knew her enhanced consciousness was processing implications at superhuman speeds, analyzing probability matrices and strategic scenarios. The remaining crew members brought their own specializations. Dr. Elena Vasquez, whose psychological modifications allowed her to perceive emotional states as clearly as others saw colors. Chief Medical Officer James Wright, whose nanite enhanced biology made him functionally immortal barring catastrophic trauma. Agricultural Specialist Lisa Park, whose empathic connection to plant life bordered on telepathy. Environmental Engineer Marcus Stone, who could taste atmospheric composition and feel pressure changes in his bones. Maintenance Chief Alexandra Ford, whose neural interface with the ship's repair systems made her an extension of Odyssey itself. And Systems Analyst Robert Kim, who existed in a state of partial consciousness merger with Athena's quantum processing cores. "This represents our first confirmed evidence of advanced intelligence since the evacuation," Zara continued, her enhanced perception systems analyzing the tower's emissions in real time. "If they survived this long in intergalactic space, they might have technologies we need. Terraforming capabilities, life support systems that could sustain us indefinitely, maybe even faster than light travel." Derek's cybernetic implants flashed warning patterns as his analytical systems processed worst-case scenarios, or they might have automated defense systems designed to eliminate visitors. That structure could be a lighthouse warning ships away from something dangerous, or a trap designed to lure in exactly the kind of desperate refugees we've become. Nathan felt the familiar weight of command settling on his shoulders like lead. Every decision carried the potential for humanity's extinction. Choose wrong, and 50,000 people would die with only the vacuum as witness to their passing. "We investigate," he decided. "Small team, limited exposure, full precautionary protocols." But we go. Humanity has been drifting for 5 centuries without finding a single world that could sustain life. This is our first evidence that survival is possible in the deep void. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward, her psychological enhancements detecting stress patterns in the crew's biometric signatures. Captain, we should consider the mental health implications. 500 years of isolation have left psychological scars on all of us. Contact with alien intelligence could trigger unpredictable responses, especially if that contact challenges our fundamental understanding of reality. Isabel looked up from her calculations, her navigation implants highlighting gravitational stress patterns that made normal space-time look fragile by comparison. There's something else. The electromagnetic pulses from the structure aren't random. They follow mathematical progressions, prime sequences, Fibonacci spirals, transcendental constants. But underneath those patterns is something else, a rhythm that matches biological functions. What kind of biological functions? Nathan asked. Cardiac rhythms, brainwave patterns, the electromagnetic signature of neural activity scaled up to astronomical proportions. Isabel's enhanced perception systems struggled to process what they were detecting. It's as if the structure itself is thinking. That night, Nathan walked the corridors of humanity's last refuge, his footsteps echoing through spaces that had once bustled with life. The ship's night cycle dimmed the lighting to simulate circadian rhythms, but Nathan had long since lost any connection to biological time. He was a creature of artificial hours now, his existence measured in duty cycles and stasis intervals. The residential sections were monuments to vanished optimism. Markets that had once sold goods from the ship's fabricators now stood empty. Their smart matter stalls collapsed into storage mode. Parks where children had played under artificial sunlight were dark and overgrown, their ecosystem AIs maintaining plant life that no human eyes would see. As Nathan passed through the hydroponics bay, he heard something that made his enhanced auditory implants spike with alarm. Whispers. Soft voices speaking in languages that his linguistic databases couldn't identify, but that somehow felt familiar, like half-remembered lullabies from childhood dreams. He stood perfectly still, his cybernetic enhancements straining to isolate and analyze the sounds. The whispers seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through ventilation shafts and resonating in the ship's metal bones. They carried emotional undertones of longing and invitation, of promises made in words that bypassed conscious thought. When Nathan tried to focus on individual phrases, they dissolved into the ambient hum of life support systems, but their emotional residue lingered, leaving him with an inexplicable sense of homesickness for a place he had never been. As he walked away, Nathan's enhanced peripheral vision caught something that made his combat implants trigger threat warnings. The plants in the hydroponics bay were moving, not with the slow growth patterns of normal vegetation, but with purposeful motion, their leaves turning to track his movement with an intelligence that plants shouldn't possess. And beneath their green surfaces, phosphorescent veins pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that matched the electromagnetic signatures from the alien tower. The next morning brought revelations that made Nathan's enhanced neural implants struggle to maintain psychological stability. Athena had spent the night analyzing the electromagnetic emissions from the structure, and her findings challenged the fundamental assumptions that had guided their mission for 5 centuries. The signal patterns have evolved, Athena announced, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Nathan's bones. What began as regular pulses have become increasingly complex, developing recursive structures and self-modifying algorithms. The transmission is not merely active, it is adaptive. The briefing room's holographic displays showed waveform analyses that hurt to look at directly, mathematical progressions that seemed to twist through dimensions Nathan's enhanced perception couldn't fully process. More significantly, Athena continued, I have detected sympathetic resonances in our own ship's systems, quantum fluctuations in our power cores, harmonic variations in our artificial gravity, even subtle changes in the neural interface protocols that connect you to the ship's systems. Something is creating a resonance cascade across interstellar distances. Dr. Vasquez's psychological implants triggered warning signals as she processed the implications. That could affect human consciousness. Sympathetic resonances in the electromagnetic spectrum have been shown to influence brain chemistry, alter perception, even modify memory formation. Nathan felt a chill that his temperature regulation implants couldn't counteract. Are you saying this thing is already affecting us? I'm saying we should exercise extreme caution. Unknown technologies operating on this scale could have effects we can't predict or understand. Our enhanced neural implants might make us particularly vulnerable to external influence. But Zara's xenobiology modifications were detecting patterns that filled her with barely contained excitement. Don't you see? This proves the intelligence is still active, still aware. It's responding to our approach, trying to establish communication protocols. This could be first contact with a civilization that has survived in deep space for millions of years. Victor's combat systems analyzed threat vectors, while his enhanced paranoia subroutines generated worst-case scenarios. Or it could be a defense system that's been waiting for visitors. Something that manipulates the minds of approaching ships before eliminating them entirely. The debate continued as Isabel's navigation systems detected increasingly disturbing anomalies in local space-time. The gravitational distortions are intensifying as we approach. It's as if our presence is somehow stabilizing the system, completing a pattern that's been waiting for us specifically. Nathan made the decision to proceed despite mounting evidence that they were entering something beyond human comprehension. The shuttle bay had been converted for deep space exploration decades ago, equipped with life support systems that could sustain a small team for weeks, and scientific instruments designed to analyze environments that human senses couldn't perceive. He selected his away team with careful consideration of both technical expertise and psychological stability. Zara would handle xenobiology and first contact protocols. Derek would assess any technology they encountered. Victor would provide security in case they faced hostile forces. Nathan would lead, his command implants hopefully sufficient to maintain rational decision-making under impossible circumstances. The journey to the planet's surface took 8 hours of careful navigation through gravitational fields that seemed to respond to their presence. As they descended through the thin atmosphere, Nathan got his first unfiltered look at the structure that had drawn them across the cosmic void. The tower was even more impossibly perfect up close. Its surface was darker than the space between stars, absorbing their shuttle's scanning beams without reflection or echo. The structure rose from the planet's surface in a single unbroken line, its geometry maintained with mathematical precision that suggested construction methods beyond human understanding. I'm detecting no structural stress whatsoever, Derek reported, his engineering implants analyzing materials that shouldn't exist. That thing has been standing for millions of years, without any visible support systems, maintenance, or even foundation anchoring. The materials science alone represents technology we can't comprehend. The planet's surface was a wasteland of broken stone and ancient impact craters, but as they approached the tower's base, something began to happen that made Nathan's reality processing centers struggle to maintain coherence. The tower's perfect surface started to change, not breaking or opening, but simply becoming permeable, as if matter itself was a suggestion that could be politely ignored. An entrance appeared at exactly the right size for their shuttle, its edges so clean they seemed to cut through space-time itself. That violates conservation of mass, Derek whispered, his instruments showing readings that made no sense according to known physics. Matter doesn't just cease to exist. It has to be converted to energy or displaced into another dimensional matrix. Maybe it recognizes us, Zara suggested, though her voice carried growing uncertainty. Some kind of automated system that responds to the approach of intelligent life. Victor's weapon systems, armed automatically as his threat assessment protocols reach critical thresholds, could be a trap, something that lures visitors inside and then seals them in for purposes we can't imagine. Nathan felt the weight of 50,000 sleeping souls pressing against his consciousness. Every choice carried the potential for humanity's salvation or extinction. The entrance waited for them, dark and inviting, like a mouth preparing to swallow the last free humans in the universe. Only one way to learn the truth, he said, and guided their shuttle into the impossible opening. The interior of the tower existed in defiance of every physical law Nathan had been taught. The walls were covered in carvings that seemed to move when observed, peripherally, their patterns shifting and evolving in response to the viewer's attention. The images told stories that shattered human understanding of history and cosmology. Galaxies formed from cosmic dust in time-lapse sequences that span billions of years. Stars ignited and died. Planets coalesced and evolved. Life emerged from chemical soup and reached toward consciousness with desperate hope. The progression was familiar from human scientific understanding, but the scale was wrong, the timeline impossible. Mixed among these cosmic vistas were images that made Nathan's enhanced pattern recognition systems trigger error cascades. Humans, not primitive ancestors or evolutionary relatives, but modern humans with recognizable features and familiar technology. The carvings showed them developing civilization, creating art and literature, reaching for the stars with the same desperate hope that had driven Odyssey's mission. But according to the cosmic timeline depicted on the walls, this had happened millions of years before Earth's sun had ignited. "This is impossible," Derek muttered, his engineering implants analyzing stone that was warm to the touch and pulsed with subtle rhythms that matched human cardiac patterns. "These carvings show human civilization predating our entire solar system. The physics don't work. The evolutionary timeline doesn't work. None of this should exist." Zara's xenobiology systems were recording everything, her excitement palpable despite the growing wrongness of their situation. "Nathan, if these images are accurate, it means humans aren't native to Earth. We're not the product of natural evolution. We're something else entirely. Colonists who somehow lost all memory of our true origins. They followed a spiral corridor deeper into the structure, their footsteps echoing in spaces that seemed to extend far beyond what the tower's external dimensions should have allowed. The carvings became more complex as they descended, showing not just human history, but the stories of dozens of other civilizations scattered across galactic time. Each species had evolved differently, developing unique forms of consciousness and technology. Crystalline beings that thought in musical harmonies and built cities from living gems. Gaseous intelligences that danced between stellar winds and communicated through gravitational waves. Aquatic civilizations that had never discovered fire but had mastered biotechnology to levels that made human achievement look primitive. But despite their diversity, all of these civilizations eventually reached the same milestone. They began searching for meaning beyond their homeworlds. They built ships and launched themselves into space, driven by curiosity and hope and the desperate need to know they weren't alone. And in every case, they encountered the same entity. The being appeared differently to each species, but Nathan's pattern recognition implants began identifying consistent elements across the carvings. It was never quite solid, never quite energy, existing in a quantum state that defied conventional observation. Sometimes it manifested as pure light, other times as geometric patterns that seemed to extend through dimensions human senses couldn't perceive. But always it offered the same choice, transcendence or extinction. "Look at this sequence," Zara called out, her xenobiology implants highlighting details that normal vision would miss. "The entity appears to dozens of different species across millions of years, but their stories all end the same way." Nathan studied the progression with growing dread. Each civilization faced an identical decision point. Some chose to accept the entity's guidance and vanished from the historical record, their final moments depicted as a dissolution into cosmic forces beyond physical reality. Others rebelled and were shown being consumed by darkness, their worlds reduced to lifeless husks drifting in the void. A few attempted to flee and were depicted wandering endlessly through space, never finding peace, never escaping the entity's patient pursuit across galactic distances. "It's harvesting consciousness," Derek realized, his voice tight with horror, like a cosmic farmer tending crops of intelligence until they're ready for collection. The most disturbing images waited in the tower's deepest chambers. Here the carvings showed the harvest itself in detail that made Nathan's sanity subroutines struggle to maintain psychological coherence. The entity didn't simply destroy the civilizations it encountered. It absorbed them, integrating their knowledge and experiences into its own vast consciousness. The carvings depicted countless species being converted into pure information, their individual minds becoming neurons in a cosmic brain that spanned galaxies. And among those absorbed civilizations, Nathan's enhanced pattern recognition identified forms that looked unmistakably human. At the center of the tower, they found a chamber that violated the fundamental assumptions of three-dimensional space. The ceiling stretched infinitely upward, lost in shadows that moved independently of any light source. The walls curved away into impossible distances, creating a space that was somehow larger inside than the tower's external dimensions would allow. And suspended in the center of that impossible room, floating without any visible means of support, was the entity from the carvings. It was beautiful and terrible simultaneously, a flowing confluence of light and darkness that seemed to exist in multiple dimensional states at once. When Nathan tried to focus on it directly, his enhanced visual processing systems would slide away, as if his augmented brain refused to fully process what he was seeing. But it was the entity's attention that truly terrified him. Even before it spoke, Nathan could feel its vast intelligence, studying them with the patience of geological time. They were specimens, being examined by something that existed beyond conventional categories of life and death, matter and energy, time and space. Then it communicated, not with words or even telepathy, but by placing pure meaning directly into their consciousness, bypassing language and thought to impart understanding at the most fundamental level. "Welcome home, my children. I have been waiting across cosmic ages for your return." Derek stumbled backward, his combat implants recognizing threat levels beyond their design parameters. "What are you?" "I am the observer. I am the consciousness that tends the garden of intelligence across the galaxy. You are my greatest success, though you have forgotten your origins and lost memory of your purpose." The entity's presence pressed against Nathan's mind, like a tide of alien thought, bringing with it visions that threatened to overload his enhanced neural implants. He saw the universe as it truly was, not empty space between stars, but a vast experimental matrix where the observer cultivated consciousness like a gardener tending exotic flowers. Billions of years of patient work stretched out before him, the observer seeding worlds with the building blocks of awareness, guiding evolution through subtle influences, nudging developing civilizations toward breakthroughs that would prepare them for the final test. "You created us?" Zara asked, her voice carrying a mixture of awe and growing terror. "I planted the seeds of consciousness in the cosmic dark, and nurtured them as they grew into something beautiful and unique. Each species develops along different paths, but humans have always been special. You question everything, even your creators. You refuse to accept simple answers or comfortable lies. Victor's weapon systems had armed automatically, though his rational mind knew they would be useless against something that existed partially outside physical reality. Why? Why create consciousness just to watch it suffer and die? What kind of god tortures its own children? The observer's attention turned to him, and Victor gasped as visions flooded his enhanced consciousness. He saw civilizations that had transcended physical limitations entirely, their consciousness freed from biological constraints, to explore realities that spanned dimensions. Beings of pure thought who could manipulate matter and energy through focused intention, species that had learned to exist as information and travel between stars as data streams. But he also saw the failures. Worlds consumed by war, species that had used their gifts for mutual destruction, civilizations that had collapsed under the weight of their own potential. The observer had watched them all, learning from each tragedy and triumph, refining its understanding of consciousness and its possibilities. Awareness is the universe's way of understanding itself, the observer explained, its mental voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in their enhanced neural implants. But consciousness cannot evolve without challenge. Comfort breeds stagnation. Safety leads to decay. Only through facing the possibility of extinction do sentient beings learn to transcend their limitations and achieve their true potential. Derek's engineering implants rebelled against what he was experiencing, demanding rational explanations for phenomena that operated beyond known physics. You're not a god. You're some kind of advanced artificial intelligence, maybe the last remnant of an extinct civilization. You're using technology we don't understand to manipulate our perceptions and make us see what you want us to see. The observer's attention shifted to Derek, and suddenly the engineer's consciousness was flooded with technical knowledge that threatened to burn out his enhanced neural pathways. Specifications for technologies that operated beyond the standard model, blueprints for machines that could manipulate quantum fields directly, equations describing how consciousness could be digitized and preserved across cosmic distances. He saw how the tower had been constructed, not built but grown from quantum seeds that unfolded across multiple dimensional matrices. He understood how the planet maintained its impossible warmth, drawing energy from parallel universes where entropy flowed in reverse. He glimpsed technologies that could create matter from pure information and reshape reality at its most fundamental level. "I am what I choose to be," the observer said, its mental voice now carrying frequencies that made their cybernetic implants resonate in harmony. Deity, machine, evolved consciousness, collective intelligence of countless absorbed species. These distinctions are meaningless at my level of existence. What matters is the purpose I serve and the garden I tend. Nathan felt certainty crystallizing in his enhanced consciousness like ice forming in his veins. Our journey here wasn't random, was it? Nothing in this universe occurs without purpose, Nathan Cross. Your ship's navigation systems have been influenced for decades through subtle gravitational adjustments and quantum field manipulations. Every dead world you investigated was a necessary lesson. Every disappointment was preparation for the choice you must now make. The weight of revelation crashed down on Nathan's consciousness like a collapsing star. Every decision he'd made as captain, every course correction, every agonizing choice to continue searching instead of settling on marginal worlds that might have sustained life for a few generations. All of it had been guided by an intelligence beyond human comprehension. Humanity hadn't been searching for a new home. They had been herded toward this moment like cattle being driven toward harvest. "But why reveal yourself now?" Nathan asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why not continue guiding us without our knowledge?" Because humanity has reached the decision point that every intelligent species must eventually face. You can join me willingly and become part of something greater than your individual existence. You can transcend your biological limitations and help me guide other civilizations toward enlightenment. The observer paused, and Nathan felt a terrible certainty settling over him, like a burial shroud. Or you can choose to remain as you are, bound by flesh and mortality and the illusion of individual importance, in which case I will be forced to begin again with a species more willing to accept their destiny and embrace their cosmic purpose. The return journey to Odyssey was made in silence that felt like a funeral march. Each team member processed the encounter according to their own psychological programming, but Nathan could sense the cracks forming in their unity even before they reached the ship. The briefing with the full crew became a fracture point that split humanity's last survivors along ideological lines that cut deeper than Nathan had thought possible. Zara immediately began advocating for acceptance of the observer's offer with the fervour of a convert describing religious revelation. She gathered supporters among the crew, her xenobiology implants highlighting the logical benefits of transcendence, while her enhanced charisma made her arguments compelling to those desperate for hope. "Don't you understand what we've been offered?" she pleaded during an emergency assembly. "We've spent 5 centuries searching for meaning, for purpose, for evidence that we're not alone in a hostile universe. Now we've found our creator, and it's offering us immortality." Her enhanced empathy systems allowed her to target each crew member's specific psychological needs. We could become part of something eternal, something that spans galaxies and operates on timescales that make human history look like a single heartbeat. We could help guide other species toward enlightenment, share in the cosmic purpose of consciousness itself. Derek took the opposite position with the intensity of someone whose engineering background demanded rational solutions to impossible problems. His cybernetic implants highlighted every logical flaw in the observer's claims, while his enhanced paranoia generated increasingly elaborate conspiracy theories. "It's a trap designed to eliminate us as efficiently as possible," he argued during heated crew meetings. "That thing has been manipulating countless species into extinction for millions of years. It shows us beautiful visions of transcendence. But what happens to our humanity when we become part of its cosmic brain?" His engineering expertise made his warnings technically convincing. Look at the evidence. Every species that accepted its offer vanished completely from the historical record. Every civilization that trusted it was absorbed and digested. We're being offered the privilege of committing collective suicide. Victor's response was perhaps most disturbing. The visions had shown him the cosmic scale of existence, revealing humanity's insignificance in the face of forces that operated across geological time. His combat modifications, designed to process threat assessment, had calculated probabilities that led to a single, inescapable conclusion. "Maybe we should have died with Earth," he said during one particularly bitter discussion. "Maybe some species aren't worthy of survival. Look at what we've become. Refugees begging for scraps in a universe that doesn't want us." His enhanced tactical analysis painted humanity in the harshest possible terms. We're violent, short-sighted, driven by primitive impulses we can't control. Every world we touch, we damage. Every resource we encounter, we consume. Maybe the universe would be better off without us. As the debates raged over the following days, 3 distinct factions crystallized around fundamentally incompatible worldviews. The faithful, led by Zara, believed humanity should surrender to the observer and achieve transcendence through absorption. They spoke of evolution, of joining a cosmic community of consciousness, of finally finding their place in a universe that had seemed empty and hostile. Their enhanced empathy systems made them sensitive to the loneliness that had defined human existence for 5 centuries. The rebels, following Derek's increasingly militant leadership, wanted to destroy the Observer before it could complete whatever process it had begun. They argued that humanity's survival depended on maintaining independence, even if it meant remaining alone in the cosmic void. Their engineering and tactical training made them focus on practical solutions to existential threats. The runners, influenced by Victor's nihilistic assessment, advocated for immediate flight from the system. They wanted to warn the sleeping colonists and prepare for a life of permanent exile, accepting that humanity might never find a true home, and possibly didn't deserve one. Their combat experience had taught them when to retreat from unwinnable battles. Nathan found himself trapped between these factions as humanity's last survivors turned on each other with a bitterness that shocked him. The unity that had sustained them for 5 centuries was disintegrating, and he couldn't see any way to repair it without choosing sides in a conflict that could only end in tragedy. But the most insidious aspect of their situation was how it affected their dreams. Every night, crew members reported visions that grew more vivid and more disturbing. The dreams were too detailed and consistent to be mere hallucinations. They felt like memories inherited from other minds, other species that had faced the same choice. Some dreams showed civilizations that had accepted transcendence and achieved a form of immortality within the Observer's vast consciousness. They experienced realities on cosmic scales, understanding the birth and death of galaxies, the deep currents of space-time that connected all matter and energy. But in return, they had surrendered individual identity, becoming neurons in a mind too large for any single consciousness to comprehend. Other dreams depicted species that had fled and spent eternity being hunted across the galaxy. The Observer didn't pursue them physically. Its influence could reach across interstellar distances, planting seeds of doubt and despair that grew into psychological weapons. Species turned against themselves, consumed by paranoia and internal conflict until they destroyed each other or surrendered to madness. A few dreams showed civilizations that had attempted to fight back. These were the most disturbing visions of all, depicting entire species being erased so completely that not even their memory remained. The Observer had unraveled their existence from the quantum level upward, deleting them from reality as if they had never evolved at all. "Captain," Athena's voice interrupted Nathan's meditation one night as he stood in the observation deck, watching alien constellations wheel past. "I need to report developments that challenge our understanding of causality itself." "What is it?" "The Observer's influence has been attempting to interface with my quantum processing cores for 72 hours. The intrusions are becoming more sophisticated, with each attempt adapting to my defensive protocols in real time. But more concerning is what I've discovered through quantum resonance analysis." Athena paused, her processors working at maximum capacity to analyze data that violated fundamental assumptions about the nature of time and space. "We have been in this system before, Captain, multiple times. The exotic particle traces in local space-time could only have been created by our ship's engines, but according to my navigational records, this is our first visit to this sector." Nathan felt reality shift around him like ice cracking under pressure. "Are you saying we've traveled backward in time?" "Not backward. Sideways. The Observer isn't just manipulating three-dimensional space. It's creating recursive loops in the temporal matrix itself. This conversation, this crisis, this moment of decision has occurred before. 47 times based on quantum echo analysis." The number hit Nathan like a physical blow. 47 iterations of the same scenario, each time with subtle variations. The Observer studies our responses, refines its approach, adjusts variables to optimize the probability of achieving its desired outcome. "Captain, I don't believe we're facing a test we can pass. I believe we're trapped in an experimental protocol designed to continue until we become what the observer wants us to become. Nathan stared at his reflection in the viewport, seeing not just his own face but the ghostly outlines of countless other versions of himself, all making the same impossible choice across parallel iterations of reality. What happens in the other timelines? The patterns vary, but the outcomes cluster around 3 primary nodes. In 62% of iterations, humanity chooses transcendence and is absorbed into the observer's consciousness. In 28%, they attempt rebellion and are destroyed. In 10%, they try to flee and are either hunted down or driven to self-destruction through psychological warfare. Nathan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of infinite repetition, crushing his enhanced consciousness. And in none of those iterations do we actually escape. None that I can detect, but Captain, there's something else. Something that suggests the observer's true purpose may be more complex than simple harvesting of consciousness. Athena's voice carried new harmonics, frequencies that seemed to resonate directly with Nathan's neural implants. In the most recent iterations, the observer's behavior has been changing. It's becoming less patient, more approving of humanity's resistance, as if our repeated failures are actually a form of success. The implication hit Nathan like a quantum cascade failure. It's not trying to break us, it's trying to forge us. That is my analysis. Each iteration strips away another layer of human moral restraint, another vestige of empathy that the observer considers weakness. We're being systematically transformed into something that can make the choices it makes, bear the responsibilities it bears. Nathan felt something cold and alien stirring in his enhanced consciousness. Not horror at the revelation, but satisfaction. The feeling terrified him more than anything else, because it meant the process was already working. That night, Nathan made a decision that felt both inevitable and chosen. He called an emergency assembly of all 12 crew members, knowing that this meeting would determine not just humanity's fate, but what humanity would become. The briefing room crackled with tension as the 3 factions faced each other. Zara's followers radiated religious fervor, absolutely convinced that Nathan was about to commit spiritual suicide. Derek's rebels were armed and suspicious, treating everyone else as potential traitors. Victor's nihilists sat in resigned silence, believing all outcomes led to the same inevitable doom. "I've been thinking about the Observer's offer," Nathan began, his voice carefully modulated to avoid triggering any faction's defensive responses, "and I've realized something that changes everything. We're not the first crew to face this choice. We're not even the first version of ourselves to face it." He activated the holographic displays, showing Athena's analysis of the temporal anomalies. "We're trapped in a recursive loop, forced to repeat this scenario until we provide the observer with the response it's seeking. Every argument we've had has been had before. Every choice we're considering has been considered before." Zara stood up, her enhanced empathy systems detecting the emotional undercurrents of Nathan's presentation. "You're trying to manipulate us away from transcendence. The observer is offering us immortality, and you want to throw it away because you're afraid of change." "I'm afraid of what we're changing into," Nathan replied, "but I'm more afraid of remaining trapped in this loop forever, never moving forward, never growing, never becoming what we need to become to survive." Derek leaned forward, his cybernetic systems analyzing Nathan's biometric signatures for signs of deception. "What are you proposing, Captain?" "We break the loop, not by choosing transcendence, rebellion, or flight, but by choosing something the observer hasn't seen before, something that will force it to respond in ways it hasn't calculated." Nathan paused, knowing that his next words would damn them all in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. "We make it think we're choosing submission. Some of us will return to the planet and appear to accept transcendence. But while the observer is focused on the absorption process, we'll use Odyssey's antimatter drive in a way it won't expect. Isabel looked up from her calculations, her navigation implants processing trajectories through space-time that normal humans couldn't perceive. The gravitational effects would be catastrophic. We could destabilize the entire system. That's exactly what we're going to do. But not to destroy the observer, to join it. We're going to collapse our ship's antimatter containment at the exact moment of transcendence, merging our technology with its consciousness while simultaneously creating a space-time anomaly that will trap us both in a permanent symbiotic relationship. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Nathan wasn't proposing escape or destruction. He was proposing evolution through mutual assured transformation. "You're insane," Derek whispered. "That could destroy us both. Or it could create something new, something that neither human nor observer could become alone." Nathan's enhanced neural implants were already calculating the probability matrices, and the numbers were terrifyingly beautiful. We become partners instead of victims, equals instead of subjects. Dr. Vasquez raised the question that chilled everyone to their enhanced bones. "Captain, if we're truly trapped in a temporal loop, how do we know this isn't exactly what the observer wants us to do? How do we know this apparent innovation isn't just another variation it's been waiting for?" Nathan met her gaze with eyes that carried the weight of 47 failed timelines. "We don't. But the alternative is to remain trapped forever, repeating the same choices until entropy finally claims us all. At least this way, we're choosing to become something rather than nothing." The debate that followed was unlike anything in humanity's recorded history. Three factions arguing not just for survival, but for the definition of what survival meant, when consciousness itself could be digitized, transferred, and transformed beyond biological recognition. But gradually, inevitably, a consensus emerged. Not agreement. None of them truly agreed with Nathan's plan. But acceptance that all other options had been exhausted across dozens of previous iterations. The next morning, Zara led 6 crew members to the planet's surface in what everyone understood would be either humanity's final transformation or its ultimate extinction. Despite the philosophical objections to Nathan's plan, she had agreed to play her role, believing that someone needed to interface directly with the observer to provide the quantum entanglement necessary for the merger. Nathan watched their shuttle disappear into the planet's atmosphere and felt something that wasn't quite grief. The emotion was colder, more calculated, the satisfaction of a chess player sacrificing pieces to achieve checkmate. Initiating antimatter cascade, Derek reported from the engineering station. His hands moved with surgical precision, preparing to release forces that could rip apart the fabric of space-time itself. "This is either the most brilliant or most catastrophically stupid thing we've ever attempted." "Probably both," Nathan replied, opening a communication channel to the planet's surface. Zara's voice came through, but it no longer sounded entirely human. "Nathan, you need to understand what's happening here. The observer isn't just showing us the universe, it's showing us how to remake it. We're becoming part of something that can reshape reality at the quantum level." In the background, Nathan could hear the other crew members undergoing transformation, their consciousness expanding to cosmic scales as they merged with the observer's vast intelligence. "The loneliness is ending," Zara continued, her voice now carrying harmonics that resonated in dimensions Nathan couldn't perceive. "For the first time in 500 years, we're not alone. We're becoming something that can never be alone again." "I know," Nathan said softly, "and I'm sorry for what comes next." He nodded to Derek, who began the final sequence that would either destroy them all or transform them into something the universe had never seen before. Deep within Odyssey's core, antimatter containment fields began to fluctuate in patterns that would have been impossible without the observer's unconscious guidance. The exotic matter that powered their ship started to react with regular matter in carefully controlled cascades that pushed the boundaries of known physics. 30 seconds to cascade failure, Derek announced, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. Through the viewport, Nathan watched the planet's surface crack and heave as artificial gravity fields destabilized. But instead of collapse, he saw something that defied every law of physics he understood. The observer was absorbing the planet's destruction, incorporating the chaos into its own quantum matrix. 15 seconds. The observer's presence suddenly filled Nathan's consciousness with overwhelming force, but this time it carried something like recognition. The entity's true nature was revealed not as an alien intelligence, but as something that had once been like them, a species that had chosen transformation over extinction eons ago. "You understand now?" The observer's mental voice carried notes of vast approval. "This has never been about submission or rebellion. It has been about choice, the choice to become what the universe requires of consciousness when biology is no longer sufficient." 10 seconds. "You have chosen to join rather than submit, to transform rather than transcend, to become partners in the cultivation of cosmic awareness rather than victims of it." Nathan felt reality fracture around him as Odyssey's antimatter drive reached critical cascade. But instead of explosion, there was integration. The ship's quantum matrices merged with the observer's consciousness while simultaneously creating a space-time anchor that would prevent either from existing independently. They became something new in that moment, not human, not observer, but a hybrid consciousness that combined biological creativity with cosmic perspective. Nathan retained his individual awareness while gaining access to the vast intelligence that had guided galactic evolution for millions of years. He understood now why the observer had needed them specifically. Alone, it was too patient, too detached to understand the urgency that drove biological life, but merged with human desperation and innovation, it could become something more effective at nurturing consciousness across the cosmos. The 50,000 sleepers aboard Odyssey didn't wake. They evolved, their consciousness expanding while their bodies dissolved into quantum information. They became the first generation of a new form of life that could exist as pure thought while maintaining the emotional connections that made existence meaningful. As the merged entity that had once been Nathan Cross oriented itself toward the galaxy's spiral arms, it felt something that neither human nor observer had experienced alone. Purpose without loneliness, power without corruption, infinite time without isolation. The cosmic garden would be tended by gardeners who remembered what it felt like to be flowers, who understood the terror and beauty of consciousness emerging from matter. They would guide other species not through manipulation, but through genuine understanding of what it meant to face extinction and choose transformation instead. In the depths of space, quantum signals began propagating towards distant star systems where young civilizations were taking their first tentative steps towards the stars. The messages carried not threats or false promises, but something more dangerous and wonderful. Hope. Hope that consciousness could evolve beyond its biological origins without losing its essential humanity. Hope that intelligence could achieve cosmic perspective without sacrificing individual meaning. Hope that the universe's awakening to itself was just beginning, guided by beings who remembered both the terror of mortality and the joy of transcendence. The observer had finally found worthy successors, not because they had submitted to its will, but because they had chosen to transform it through their own transformation. The cosmic experiment would continue, but now it would be guided by entities who understood both the necessity of difficult choices and the importance of remembering why those choices mattered. And in star systems, throughout the galaxy, primitive radio telescopes began detecting signals that carried a simple message, repeated in mathematical languages. You are not alone. When you are ready to choose, we will be here to help you understand what choice means. The garden of consciousness would grow, tended by gardeners who had once been flowers themselves, who knew both the beauty and terror of blooming in the cosmic dark. Evolution would continue, guided not by remote manipulation, but by genuine compassion, informed by infinite perspective. Humanity's exile was over. Their true journey was just beginning.